It's important to have a lot of stimulation with a child and everybody around. What are some of the tips you could give to increase that thing called stimulation?
Stimulation, when it comes to fostering development of babies, can be overdone and certainly underdone. There's become a sort of sense of if you don't really stimulate your baby, then the baby won't develop. That's not true. Babies have developed perfectly fine when they're not overly stimulated. But appropriate interaction between mother and baby or father and baby, recognizing the cues of engagement of that baby, providing the kinds of other tools, whether it be toys or rattles or things that are developmentally appropriate, are all part of the baby learning about the environment. But the most important stimulation is you, the mother or the parent. It's the face, it's the smiles, it's the language, it's the soothing tones, all that connection is the most important stimulation that can be done with a newborn baby. As the newborn baby gradually grows and becomes more receptive to more other things that might go on, there's other opportunities, whether it's colors or shapes or sounds or reading. All of that is sort of led by the baby, but needs to be responded to by the mother or the caregiver. And then as the baby's developmental stages go into the second and third month, as they start to be able to lift their head up and their smile is now truly interactive, then lots of other things can be done in the crib or in the play area that can allow a child to simply begin to recognize what is out there in the world. These stages of development and of incredibly sort of finding those things that the baby will respond to are very important to growth and development of the baby. But don't overdo it. We don't need flashcards at 4 months of age. There's a tendency that parents get sort of so over-involved that they think that if something's not going all the time, then there's going to be a lack. That's not the case. Remember, the most important stimulation for that baby is you, your words, your looks, your feel, your touch, your interaction and engagement throughout. That's the most important stimulus.
And a lot of how you feel is also in your hands. So you should be very gentle, you should be soothing, and that calms the baby too. Sometimes that's something we forget about.
No question. There's lots of research to show the importance of infant touch on stimulation, on receptivity, on growth of brain, on development of a sense of attachment. We sometimes forget that the touch and the feel of the skin is a two-way street, that you get something from it and the baby gets something from it. Tiffany Field at Nova University in Florida has done extensive research on touch and infant massage, but it doesn't have to be formal massage. Just caressing, holding, touching, all of that skin-to-skin stuff really is important to the baby developing a sense of security. What's amazing is those first videos of babies as they are crawling up the mother's belly in the very first minutes of life. It's the skin-to-skin connection that stimulates hormonal response in the mother. All the hormonal responses that are necessary to shrink the uterus and to begin to have milk flow that starts, a lot of that is stimulated by skin-to-skin. So if we extend that into the early weeks and months of a baby's life, the skin-to-skin touch is a tremendously important stimulus for the baby and the mother and the father to sort of connect. And it's enjoyable for both.
People read books, they think the kid has to do something exactly by the 4th month or by the 6th month, but babies don't always grow evenly. Is that true?
Absolutely. The key to development is that there is continuity, that it's moving forward, that's progress. When we first designed and created the child care book for the Academy of Pediatrics, we were worried about having sort of developmental milestones that parents would regard as must happen by such and such a time. So we built in, there's a range. The key is, has there been progress? Has there been movement? If it didn't happen at 7 months and it happens at 8 months, it's okay. And not to get so sort of frenetic or crazy about if it doesn't hit a certain immediate time. They are meant to be ranges of normal, and keep that in mind. If a baby pulls to stand at 11 months and some others don't do it till 13 months, that's okay. As long as there's been a gradual growth and development of that skill so that walking and moving around on their feet becomes the next step of development. I know sometimes parents have come to me and said, my baby's not walking by 1. The important question is, well, what is your baby doing? Well, actually, rolling rolling over, she's pulling to stand, occasionally she lets go. I said, that's the first step. Promise you, your baby will walk. And therefore it's important to reinforce the fact that there are no absolute guidelines in which it is not happening at a certain point, then you must start to worry. Now that's not to say that sometimes babies fall outside the range and the developmental progress is slower or is not happening appropriately. So at some point there can be recognition that, okay, it's not going in the right direction, but that's a small number of babies. The vast majority are within a range of normal, and not to get worried if it doesn't sort of hit a specific month or day.
Parents should probably discuss amongst themselves how they should approach anything to do with the baby so they don't have an argument or disagreement in front of the child. Is that a wise maneuver?
It's important that mother and father or caregivers who are caring for the baby are together in the way they're managing the baby from very beginning throughout. That's not to say they won't disagree sometimes, but those arguments should best be held away from the child. The worst thing can happen, especially as children get older and verbal, is to split the parents and to know that the father will say one thing and the mother another, and you can go to one. Now that often happens, and it's important to try and minimize that. It still is going to happen at times, but it's best to get your sort of signals together before the baby or child gets to a point where he or she could sort of read where those differences are and take advantage of those differences. It's hard raising kids. Kids are demanding, and kids have different needs, and different kids even within the same family are hard. So you may have adjusted to the first, and along comes a second who's a much different child. All that takes communication between mother and father clearly so that you recognize those differences and respond appropriately to those differences. Everyone I know, if they've had a first child, then have a second, and they say, boy, this child's very different than the first. Yep. That's the way they're made. The wiring may be very similar, but probably not. And it doesn't take a lot of different kind of wiring inside to make a child be a different reactor, more sensitive, less sensitive, you name it. But the more the parent can talk to each other about, boy, we need to approach this differently than we did our first child, that's going to be a better way of dealing with child rearing.
There's a famous psychologist, I think it's Cleveland, say, be a parent first and a buddy second. Is that sort of like a good philosophy?
Chaim Ganot was really one of the forerunners of many of the practices that we use. We looked to Chaim Ganot, who was in the 60s actually in Cleveland, and a renowned child development expert whose books you can still find. And it is very important that parenting is a skill that you learn not from books, so you may get some helpful hints from books, but just by being a parent. And most of the time that means having the oversight about how a child is doing and being there for the child, but at the same time, you're not the child's best friend. You are there to make sure that they develop and grow, develop their own friends. It's a different role than being a parent, and a wonderful role being a parent, but different than just being a buddy.